this next image, a dark swirling portal on the wall and a small child looking up and the parent saying, "It's just the abyss, dear. Try not to gaze into it." And then just one more image to share with you. Perhaps something a bit more familiar in a Buddhist context, but something similar to that idea of not looking into the abyss. Perhaps you've heard the story of the Bodhisattva, the Buddha-to-be, when he escaped the palace, where he was being mollycoddled by his family and where the reality of life was shielded from his eyes. And then he escaped the escaped the palace and went out into the world, and he saw these sights. He saw for the first time a sick person. He saw for the first time an old person. He saw a corpse, and he saw a sage. So this story of the Buddha, which actually isn't found in the suttas, but is found in the commentaries of the Buddha's life and found in various Jataka stories. This is one of the big mythologies of Buddhism. And it's a wonderful story because it's so powerful. We have this idea of a princely person, someone who is rich, noble, privileged, who is hidden from the world's vicissitudes, who doesn't know what's out there in the world. He's protected. He's screened from that world. And then he encounters that world. He encounters things that happen in that world. Old age happens. Sickness happens. Death happens. These are things that we too have to confront in our own lives. These are things which perhaps society in many ways tries to keep hidden from us. These are things that we try to keep hidden from ourselves, pushing them from the corner of our mind. We don't like to think about it. We don't like to talk about it. This idea of death scares us, troubles us. When the Bodhisattva, to be the Buddha, encountered these things in the world, he felt this experience of samvega, this spiritual urgency, this fear, this strange, uncanny feeling that this was something that was troubling, deeply troubling. And that last sight, the sight of the sage, a spiritual practitioner, this was inspiration. This was a path that led away from these grim realities of old age, sickness, and death. This was an opportunity for escape, a motivation to practice a spiritual life. And so when it comes to thinking about these issues, confronting them head on is important for our spiritual practice. Seeing these things for what they are, old age, sickness, death, an inescapable fate, is an essential part of our spiritual development. And this is why monks like me or Buddhist culture, we like to think about these topics. We like to create a safe place for people to encounter these teachings so that they can ponder and reflect upon what it means. And this is something that goes against the trajectory of the world. It goes against the way our society functions. Think about something like old age. We try so hard to pretend it's not something that's going to happen to us. We put on our moisturizer. We use a good filter on Instagram. We get a facelift perhaps. We dye our hair. We don't like to think it's going to happen to us. And perhaps as is in the case in Australia, we hide our old people away from us, put them in nursing homes, retirement villages. We don't show them on television. We have young, fresh, healthy-looking stars. And the same with sickness. We don't like to believe that sickness is something that's going to happen to us. Even with the pandemic, we have spent several years now trying to avoid getting sick. Sure, we can sanitize our hands, wear a face mask, practice social distancing, but sickness is also something that is inescapable. And even right now in our bodies, things are going wrong. There's an ache, there's a pain, there's a soreness, perhaps there's even a disease developing inside our bodies right now. We also like to think that sickness is something that is unusual, something that is wrong, something that shouldn't happen. But of course, we know that sickness is something that is natural, that has to happen. We have a body, it gets sick. And similarly, of course, we have a body, we are born, we have to die. And there's no escaping death. Buddha frequently talked about old age, sickness, and death. He talked about reflecting on death, being aware, making it real in our minds by contemplating this inescapable fate. He said there were so many ways to die, so many future perils. Talked constantly about the brevity of life, impermanence. And so these three things, old age, sickness, and death, these are things that are intrinsically linked to the idea of samvega. There's a kind of fear that might come up, an urgency that might be developed when we touch into these quite challenging, difficult subjects. But there's a few other things that can be added on to this list. And this will help make us add up to the 5 frequent reflections, which we're going to do in a few moments, a meditation on the 5 frequent reflections taught by the Buddha, which are old age, sickness, death, and then separation. Separation, this truth that everything that we are connected to in this life, everything that is dear and pleasing to us must become separate to us. It means our youth, our good looks, means our family, our friends who must die. It means our status, which can change so easily, our personal possessions, which can be stolen or taken away from us, or lost or broken. It means even this very body, which we mistake as being ours, even we must become separate from this body at the end of our life. And so this truth of separation is something that the Buddha asks us to reflect upon. And the last of those 5 frequent reflections is the truth of kamma. And so those first 4 reflections are a way for us to become familiar with the reality of what it means to be alive, the reality of existence, the truth of impermanence, of not self. And this last one, kamma, this is something slightly different. This is an ethical dimension. This is a spiritual invitation to think about what it means to live, what it means to practice a spiritual path. It's an invitation to question, how am I living my life? Knowing that all actions done with intention, I will be the heir of those actions. I will inherit my karma. Cannot take my possessions or my status from one life to the next, but I will be tied to this karma. I will experience the results of my actions. I will abide, supported by my karma. And so knowing this, how am I living my life? And so these 5 reflections are something that the Buddha encouraged us to think about. He said, it's an opportunity for all of us, whether we're monastics or lay people, to reflect upon these things frequently. The reason for this, of course, is to make real the truth of these things. Because the tendency we have is like that parent when that child is looking up into that void on the wall to say, don't look at it, don't look at it. That's the tendency that we have in our own mind. We have this tendency to willfully blind ourselves to these truths. Sure, we see other people getting old around us, but can we make it real to ourselves? When other people get sick, we think, oh, that's just how it is. But when we get sick, something has gone wrong, right? We see other people dying. We know that we also must die. And yet we live each day as if tomorrow will come. One day, tomorrow won't come. One day, this day, perhaps, could be the day that we die. So we get used to these ideas. We get used to the idea of being separated from youth, separated from health, separated from this life. We investigate what it means to be attached and what it means to let go. We understand that our actions matter. We investigate karma. We ask ourselves, how are we living our life? And so in this way, we incline our mind more and more towards seeing the truth, seeing the real nature of our lives. And we make a response. And so this is why we practice these 5 frequent reflections. And we'll see as the talk goes along why this relates to the concept of samvega. And so what we're going to do now is just 20 minutes of meditation practice, practicing these 5 frequent reflections taught by the Buddha. So let's all now take a comfortable posture and to allow yourself to just arrive in this body here and now. You might want to just take the shoulders up to the ears and roll them back, opening up the chest, feeling like you can let go of some of that tension, tightness in the body. And let go also of the morning, of your day, of all the busyness and activity of your life. Just leaving the past in the past. And not worrying, not planning, not thinking about the future. The future is so uncertain. And so instead of being in the past or in the future, by letting go, we can be here, now. We can be present, aware, but relaxed. So allow yourself just to relax, letting go, softening, releasing. Just take a few moments to become more aware, more present. And perhaps you notice that merely by pausing, letting go, relaxing, naturally the mind becomes more calm, more peaceful. And so we'll use this calm, peaceful mind to begin the practice of the 5 frequent reflections. I am of the nature to age. Aging is my inescapable fate. Having been born, I am subject to aging. And this is only natural. This is what happens when we have a body. And there's a truth to aging. We know that our bodies are growing older with every moment. We see the signs, wrinkles, grey hair, decaying teeth, stiff joints, our physical faculties growing frailer, our mental faculties diminishing. And there's nothing we can do to stop it. Knowing this, why am I so obsessed with youth? Knowing this truth of old age, how am I spending my time? And there is this truth of sickness. I am subject to sickness. Having been born, I will become sick. There's so many ways for this body to become ill. A virus, a bacteria, genetics, an accident. This body is fragile. This body is subject to sickness. Even now, there's an ache, an old injury, a pain. Even now, things are going wrong in this body. And there's nothing I can do to prevent it. Why then am I so attached to this idea of health? Knowing it must change. The nature of this body is sickness. So how am I living my life? Knowing how fragile this body is. And I am subject to death. I have not gone beyond death. Having taken birth, it is natural that I must die. My human life is diminishing with every moment. My life is uncertain. There are so many ways I could die. Death is the only certainty in this life. And it's okay. It's natural. You can't hide from death. My friends and family can't help me when it comes to death. My money, my status will be of no use. And this body will fail. And there is nothing that I can do about it. Knowing this truth of death, how am I living my life? And I must become separated from all that is dear and pleasing to me. Separated from my possessions, from my job, from my status, separated from my friends, my family, my home, separated from all those things I love, all those things I hold on to. And there's nothing I can do about it. And it's okay. This is natural. Cannot hold on to anything in this world. Even this body, this me, all that I think is mine, this very sense of self, I must become separated from. Why then? Why do I grasp so strongly, cling to these things of the world? Why do I grasp this me, mine, I? I am the owner of my karma. All actions, body, speech, mind, done with intention, is karma. I am the heir to these actions. I will inherit my karma. I will abide supported by this karma, whether good or bad, unwholesome or wholesome, skillful or unskillful. Whatever actions done with intention, I will be the air. And knowing this, seeing for ourselves, even in this life, the consequences of our thoughts, speech, and actions. Knowing this, how am I living my life? How am I living my life? And just like me, all living beings everywhere are subject to old age, subject to sickness, subject to death, subject to separation, and subject to kamma. Just like me, all other beings experience these things. And so we can contemplate this internally and externally, reflecting frequently on these truths. The Buddha said, reflecting in this way, the path is born inside us. We will overcome the fetters, destroy the underlying tendencies. We will see more and more in line with the truth and develop right view. And as we come towards the end of this short practice, taking a few moments to review the meditation. How was that for you? To contemplate, to reflect upon these themes. Was it challenging? Was there some difficulty for you? Was one of these themes harder to accept? Did you find a sense of peace, of calm, accepting these difficult truths? And how did it feel to question how you're living your life? Did you feel some urgency, some inspiration? And so after doing some reflection and generating a mind in line with the truth of the Dharma, we can dedicate the merits of our practice, thinking, may all beings hear the good Dharma. May all beings practice the teachings. And may all beings attain the end of suffering, liberation, nibbana. So these are the 5 frequent reflections, and I hope that it was okay to do these. Sometimes they can bring up some troubles in our heart, some difficulties. As we continually practice these, they become easier to understand and to accept, and they become easier to work with. We start to look out for those moments in our life where we try to hide these truths from our mind. When we catch ourselves in this way, it's like we are the bodhisattva in the palace. We're trying to disguise from ourselves these truths. And the spiritual path is all about gradually allowing ourselves to come into contact with these deep, very challenging, but inescapable truths, so that we can see more and more in line with what it is to live, what it means to be. And hopefully, having seen these truths, there's some sort of response, some sort of action that follows, some sort of movement, some sort of energy that propels us further along the spiritual path. Because when we see these things, we can't unsee them. Our mind will try to keep on disguising it from us, but there'll always be a little niggling feeling at the back of our mind, a little discomfort, a little unease, some disquieting that never allows us any comfort.